This book, Black Reconstruction, is like, if for political economy, our gospel text is Capital Volume 1, and everything else we build from there. For political strategy and history, Black Reconstruction is that text for us. If you want to understand how to make a struggle in this country, whether it was in 1935 or today, you gotta go to that text. Let's get this ball rolling. Like I said, I was saying we might go a little bit over, and if folks got to go, that's okay. But we're going to try to spend a little time sharing some lessons from our study of Black Reconstruction, and then hopefully be able to have some time to discuss together, how this is relevant to the struggle today and the work that we're doing. And so here we go. I'm going to do a screen share real quick. Hold on. I'm having a little trouble.
Let me know if it's helpful for me to share for you since you're starting us off.
You know what? I think I might have it.
Okay.
Does this look okay? Is all coming through?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay. So, I was going to do a little, as we talk about Mystica or Spirit of Struggle. I feel a little under-resourced right now because I usually have a guitar with me when I sing. But tonight, I was rereading, there's a chapter 14 in Black Reconstruction is entitled The Counter-Revolution of Property. And in that, I was just kind of going over that in preparation tonight, and something hit me in a speech that was given by Senator Charles Sumner, this is not a perfect quote, but he talked something about crushing Satan underneath our heels, in the context of the fight to make Reconstruction a reality, and so that made me think of this song that I know called "Satan, Your Kingdom Must Come Down," and so I'm just going to sing a couple verses of it, and here we go. So I think it goes, "Satan, your kingdom must come down. Satan, your kingdom must come down. I heard the voice of Jesus say, Satan, your kingdom must come down. Gonna shout until they tear your kingdom down. Gonna shout until they tear your kingdom down. I heard the voice of Jesus say, Satan, your kingdom must come down. Gonna fight until they tear your kingdom down. Gonna fight until they tear your kingdom down. I heard the voice of Jesus say, Satan, your kingdom must come down." So that was from, I don't know. I first heard that from Uncle Tupelo did a version of that, is where I first heard about that song. You're going to see eventually here tonight, we're going to get into some things talking about empires and kingdoms and even dictatorships, dictatorship of capital, and the dictatorship of labor, dictatorship of the proletariat. And we're going to be talking about power. And we're talking about what kind of movement and why Reconstruction was the significant moment that it was. And so W.E.B. Du Bois is going to help us do that. you know, a lot of times we'll say when we're doing these kinds of educational pieces that, you know, we don't really, you know, we can only sort of get into just a little bit here. We can just get a taste of some of the really rich and powerful lessons from studying something as powerful as, you know, W.E.B. Du Bois's Black Reconstruction. So it's a little bit of an advertisement. Before some of y'all got on here, Hai was saying that he was kind of sad to see this series starting to come to an end here for Nassau, but we don't want this to be ships passing in the night. We're comrades and struggle together. And hopefully, like, maybe some of the stuff we talk about, y'all get excited and we'll figure out a way to keep studying this together. So that's kind of how we want to proceed. I hope that some of this will spark, you know, it'll resonate with you and spark some interest. You know, Sierra and I have been working together in this history and political strategy team, and we've been working together for, I don't know how many years, Sierra, do you know? It's been several years. And, you know, working alongside.
I think.
How many?
At least 4. At
least 4 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, we've developed curriculum around, especially looking at the history of the abolitionist movement and the Civil War and Reconstruction and the defeat of Reconstruction as a really important, if we don't grasp the real lessons of that history, in terms of understanding how class and race, in terms of how power and the poor and dispossessed, you know, the state of the poor and dispossessed right now, we feel like, you know, we're flying blind. And so this, you know, I'm just going to go over a few things to lift up, and we don't have time to get into great detail or depth, but, you know, when we study Black Reconstruction, which W.E.B. Du Bois wrote and published in 1935, and that's important, remember that, right? Du Bois writes this book about the history of Reconstruction in the depths of the Great Depression, in a moment of crisis, but also a moment of great social movement, a lot of labor militancy, a lot of folks struggling throughout the country and including in the South. And, you know, Du Bois was trying to answer questions in that moment in 1935 by looking at the history, you know, looking at the past, looking at, you know, what happened with the Civil War and Reconstruction. If you get that book, and if you don't have it already, try to get a hold of a copy of Black Reconstruction. And we can share you all the resources we've got too, in terms of getting a hold of that book. But you'll know that, you know, Du Bois starts off with 3 chapters in Black Reconstruction. And that first chapter is entitled The Black Worker. The second chapter is entitled The White Worker, and the third chapter is called The Planter. And the point here is that Du Bois lays out what we refer to as social forces, right? That are in conflict with each other and in relationship to one another. And so it's really important. I mean, he lays out kind of the struggle. It's important to note that he called him the Black worker, not the Black slave, not just Black people, but the Black worker. And it was in fact for centuries as enslaved Black workers, but as part of, connected to an economic system, right? The other thing that we've developed over time is a real strong sense from Du Bois of how movements move through stages. There's stages of development in movements, and that's critical for us as leaders, you know, as cadre, to be clear about what time it is and what stage we're in the struggle, right? Things move through a historical process. We'll talk a little bit tonight also about what we refer to as plantation politics, which, you know, goes by a lot of different names, divide and conquer, pitting the poor against each other, how the 1% controls the 99%, But Du Bois's Black Reconstruction is a key text for us to study in order to understand that. We're going to talk tonight about the missed opportunity, that Reconstruction was a revolutionary moment. From the Civil War and Reconstruction presented a revolutionary moment where the poor and dispossessed had an opportunity for independence to operate in terms of political independence from the ruling class. It was a moment where there was the most powerful section of the capitalists were defeated in the form of the slave power. But it also ultimately was an era where, through the use of plantation politics and that ultimately it led to a defeat. The Reconstruction was defeated, and we're going to talk about who came out on top. So that's this defeat of Reconstruction, and it's a new stage of the way that white supremacy and the use of racism was used to divide the poor and dispossessed coming out of Reconstruction. But I think sometimes we tell this story and it's just the same old Southern planter sipping his fucking mint and julep, right? That before the war and after war, but actually the folks who really come out on top and take control are Wall Street with the defeat of Reconstruction. And Du Bois makes that very clear. And, it kind of is summed up in the saying, with the defeat of Reconstruction, Wall Street controlled the South and the South controlled the nation. I told you that this book, Black Reconstruction, is a book not just to be read, or I said that it's, did I say it already? I don't know. I said it in my mind. Black Reconstruction, I say it in my mind every day, that Black Reconstruction is one of those books, some books are, worth reading once and checking out and getting the sense of, but I would say that Black Reconstruction is a book that's worth studying. And that means you come back to it constantly. As our situation changes, this is a book that's going to lead us to being more clear in terms of political strategy. And on that point, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King had a great appreciation for the contribution of W. Du Bois. And he gave this speech in 1968, just a few weeks before he was killed by the state. He gave a speech in honor of the 100-year anniversary of Du Bois's birth, and which took some, because Du Bois in the 60s, he had been well red-baited, right? He had been denounced as a communist, and most civil rights leaders didn't really want to touch Du Bois. But in this speech, as King's moving towards the Poor People's Campaign, which is about uniting the poor and dispossessed across lines of division, right, to become a new and unsettling force in this complacent national life, here's what he had to say about Du Bois. Can I get somebody to read this slide?
Sure. And Great. Yet, with all his pride and spirit, he did not make a mystique out of Blackness. He was proud of his people, not because of their color endowed them with some vague greatness, but because their concrete achievements and struggle had advanced humanity. And he saw and loved progressive humanity in all its hues, black, white, yellow, red, and brown. Above all, he did not content himself with hurling invectives for emotional release and then to retire into smug, passive satisfaction. History had taught him it is not enough for people to be angry. The supreme task is to organize and unite people so that their anger becomes a transforming force. It was never possible to know where the scholar Du Bois ended and the organizer Du Bois began. The two qualities in him were a single unified force.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Tanisha. So, I just wanted to reiterate this piece here where it's important that, the book, Black Reconstruction, which is, we would say, is this magnum opus, is the major work of Du Bois, is him speaking in 1934, right? And he's seeing a possible moment and opportunity, right? But he also knows, because he knows the way that labor works, he knows the way that race works in this country, and he knows that the divided nature of the folks on the bottom, that they're going to run the risk again of setting the stage for the ruling class to eat. Okay, and so just a few more just points here in terms of what I think I kind of covered a lot of this stuff, but let me see here. Just a few more points here on the left-hand side where, I've already mentioned this thing about, with the defeat of Reconstruction, Wall Street controlled the South and the South controlled the nation. We see this from the University of the Poor as a way to deepen our appreciation for the economic and political role of the South in the U.S. class struggle, right? We all know this sort of almost cliches, so goes the South, so goes the nation. But I think it's really important that we understand how actually that works. And actually then how, the struggle in the South is not just, it needs to be understood in its own context, but it also plays a role that is pivotal for good and bad for the rest of the nation. We see that Black Reconstruction is one of the most powerful models of how to approach history with a dialectical and historical materialist framework. And as well as, and this is a word that maybe you're not familiar with, I didn't know this until recently, conjunctural analysis, how to make a concrete analysis of our situation. That's political strategy. Du Bois wrote in the context of the 30s, I already said this, I already mentioned the missed moment aspect of Reconstruction. And we would say also that the 1930s ultimately became a missed moment. It became a kind of struggle, even with all of its tactical bravery and genius among working class people. It's still ultimately the folks who came out strongest on the other side of that process was Wall Street, right? The folks who emerged on the other side of this with the most political power is Wall Street. And we would even say, we'll get into this, I don't want to steal Sierra's thunder, but this is true of a lot of the struggle of the 1960s as well. And so it's important for us to understand the nature of struggle and movement, but it's also important for us to know our enemies and to understand and have a clear assessment of who we're up against. And so then, and I don't think we said the mission of the University of the Poor at the top, but our mission of the University of the Poor is to unite and develop leaders committed to the unity of the poor and dispossessed across color lines and other lines of division, so as to build a broad-based and powerful movement to end poverty. Within this activity, the University of the Poor strives to lay the basic foundation for a network of revolutionaries. This book, Black Reconstruction, is like, if for political economy, our gospel text is Capital Volume 1, and everything else we build from there. For political strategy and history, Black Reconstruction is that text for us. If you want to understand how to make a struggle in this country, whether it was in 1935 or today, you gotta go to that text. Man, I do this all the time. When I do a presentation, I always anticipate what I'm already gonna say. I already talked about what already is in the slides coming down here. Oh, well, no, this is a little different. Bear with me here. I was just gonna say that the revolutionary, so I already mentioned, and this is a little repetitive, Black Reconstruction helped us to really understand who the revolutionary social force was in the time of Reconstruction. And it also raises the question of who is that revolutionary social force? Who is it that has little or nothing to lose, right? Who is it that is the least invested at maintaining this kingdom, this power, this dictatorship of capital that we live under? In that time, it was the enslaved Black workers, but not them just alone, right? It's them in relationship to other sections that are in different ways, either in contradiction or exploited or marginalized by the slave power. That revolutionary social force has to exert leadership over these other sections of society in order for this, for us to have a movement that can sort of match our enemies. and we're arrayed against a class enemy. At the time, it was really clear the slave power was the class enemy. They were the most powerful section of society. And again, we'll make references tonight, and we'll always be happy to talk with you about how we think that it's important to think about what stages of development of that revolutionary movement, where, like, both in terms of, what is to be done today, and this book, Black Reconstruction, help us to, as a historical parallel or analogy, to understand that. So anyway, I think this is where I'm handing it to you, Sierra, right? Or no?
You're gonna do this
one? I'm doing this one. Okay, I'm doing this one. Okay. So this is just sort of like still building on the thing of both, like, the possibility and the power of Reconstruction, which I haven't even really like. So for just so we're all on the same page, like Du Bois, Reconstruction. I think Du Bois really argues that Reconstruction already starts in the midst of the Civil War, right? Like, with the process of the general strike, of Black workers freeing themselves, taking up arms, right? Playing decisive role in the war. But then, the war ends in 1865, officially. The Confederacy surrenders, Lee surrenders. And from 1865, we know that then there's this period that stretches, a lot of historians kind of set it around like the Tilden-Hayes agreement in coming out of the election of 1876 is where the defeat is the mark of the defeat of Reconstruction. So this is the period that we're talking about when we say Reconstruction. But I think this is an important quote from that Du Bois has in his book, his assessment, where he says, the South, after the war, presented the greatest opportunity for a real national labor movement. That's a movement of working class people. That's a movement of poor and dispossessed people. That's not just a union. That's not just unions. That's not just trade unions, right? That's not just industrial unions. That's a movement of wage laborers who have no property, which the nation ever saw or is likely to see for many decades. Yet the labor movement, but with few exceptions, never realized the situation. It never had the intelligence or knowledge as a whole to see in Black slavery and Reconstruction the kernel and the meaning of the labor movement in the United States, right? So I don't know if that's, here's a little trick. If you're reading Black Reconstruction, if you're reading Du Bois, whenever he says the kernel of something, you pay attention, right? This is the kernel. This is the heart and the soul of what you need to understand about this moment and the significance. And in this quote, yes, he's referring here to, the historical development of racism and white supremacy and the inability of white workers to see that Black workers were their fellow workers and they needed to unite. I had a cat just step on my keyboard here. Yes, that's part of it. But there's also, I think Du Bois is saying that labor in general, and this has always been a problem, whether we were talking about the CIO or we're talking about our moment, that we all are in our own little syndicalist little struggles here, and we're parochial and we're stuck, like we're funded today by foundations to stay in our fucking lane, right? Like to stay in our silos. So that's also part of what Du Bois is saying, is that they needed to build then, and we need to build now, a political organization of revolutionaries, right? That's clear about who we're up against and how we take them on. So anyway, I'm going to hand it over now to Sierra, and I can advance the slides if you like.
Yeah, let's do that. Hey, just again, thank you so much for having us. Like John said, we've been studying this history together for a while, and John even further back, and even still, this is our first presentation session that we've done to, at all like this. So thank you all for just allowing us to have space to experiment and learn more about this history with you all. And I guess we just look forward to continuing our relationship so that we can continue to build together. Like John also said, Black Reconstruction in America is a really important text in the UPOR, I guess, like our, like our, what did you call it? Just like one of our Bibles, I guess.
It's our canon, our
yeah. Another one of those texts is Power in America and the Southern Question, which also actually comes out of the organizing history of struggle of the University of people who formed the University of the Poor. And we're, if you haven't read Power in America and the Southern Question, no worries. We're going to go over some of the major themes and why we feel like this is important to understanding the Southern Question. We can also share with you a PDF. University of the Poor has had an incredible opportunity to reconnect with the author around Power in America. And so we're looking to sort of update this, and so it'd be good to just hear you all's thoughts as much as possible. But this text is really referring to what is like the political economic formation of the South, or what makes the South so significant and important to understanding not only the history of the United States, but our relationships and sort of what it is today. Next slide. So why we're reading or why we're getting into the Southern Question, why are we looking at Reconstruction? So Willie Baptist, who isn't here right now, I'm sure many of you all have interacted with. I'm assuming he might have come to another session, but he writes that W.E.B. Du Bois' magnum opus, Black Reconstruction, put forth the most insightful analysis and strategic lessons of a decisive and defining period in the United States history. This historical period involved the overthrow of the power of the Southern slaveholders, the defeat of Reconstruction by Wall Street, which meant the rise of the rule of big monopoly capital. And so we have some illustrations here. It's pretty difficult to read. This is coming out of John F. Keller's Power in America. And we want to just, we're using this illustration to really note why Reconstruction, why the movement to end slavery, the abolition movement, was so important and historic. This is because, this is a time where, the leadership of the poor and dispossessed were able to unite, even if only for the briefest of moments, to end a major form of capital, which is slave capital, which is something that hasn't been done in sort of like this magnitude up until then. And although and even with the taking away of this dominant form of capital, they weren't able to actually hold on to that power and take and to maintain the political power that they had shown to make this intervention. And so Black Reconstruction, when we're talking about studying revolution, as revolutionaries must do, we're studying the Reconstruction, the abolitionist movement, because of the revolutionary nature of actually taking on this enemy and again, just even for the briefest moment, kicking their ass. And then we're going to like go through what actually defeated ultimately this taking of property, of this dominant form of capital. Next slide. Okay, so this slide is pretty controversial. If anyone gets upset, we're just gonna blame Willie. I've, in my conversations with Willie recently, like he's been really sort of in this question of why we study this history as this being, a revolutionary point in time. He's been saying a lot lately that there is a difference between Rosa Parks and Harriet Tubman. And that is not to discredit anything about Rosa Parks. The incredible movement that was the civil rights movement and the gains that were made. But again, we're talking about the fact that the abolitionist movement actually abolished a dominant form of capital. And so when we're talking about revolution, we're referring to this. And so another part, Willie wrote, this major change of power relations was unlike the legislative reforms that resulted in the civil rights movement, which is often mistakenly equated with Reconstruction, that included certain legislative changes, but it cannot be reduced to those changes. And so, again, like the civil rights movement, which was, obviously significant, and gains were made, but the gains were in the were these reforms that were made within the current system. Whereas with the abolition of slavery, they completely abolished, again, this certain system of the dominant form of capital. And so we're really, again, just going to get into this revolutionary just nature of this moment. I put in this quote from Step Brothers. I don't know. Troy said that he wants to be entertained. I don't know if you've seen this movie, but he says, no one knows what it means. It's provocative. It keeps the people going. So yeah, just this slide is pretty provocative, but we do know what it means, right? We know that what we're focusing here today on is studying revolution. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Can we go back? And then just to the provocative slide. Another, when we're talking about like the differences between when we're getting into this history, and the questions that we're having is like, how do you account for the role of Wall Street in these different periods? And what does it mean to take over the concentration of a dominant form of political power, and to understand, what we're really up against, and not on a surface level, but going deeper. Sorry, can we go to the next slide? So John also talked about that we're going to get into plantation politics. And while the questions of race, racism, and white supremacy are central to the development of the Southern region and the Black Belt South, as well as the United States as a whole, are all products of history. They are products of history in all its economic, political, and cultural aspects, and are not simply the questions of race, racism, and white supremacy. And so, again, we're getting into the stages of revolutionary development. The process of Reconstruction, any point of history in the movement, it doesn't just come out of nowhere, just fully formed. The idea around racism, the divide and conquer, that didn't just, come out of nowhere. That there's a developmental process, that there's a historical process in the development of these movements. And we want to get into a little bit of like when we talk about plantation politics and where it comes from, and this and not just seeing it for white supremacy or racism for racism's sake, but how it's actually used, how it's actually weaponized against the poor and dispossessed, how we continue to be pitted against one another for the benefit and in the interest of the 1%, or those who wish to oppress and exploit us. And so we're in Black Reconstruction in America, Du Bois is really looking at these relationships and these, you know, what these different social forces and how social forces were manipulated against one another. And, you know, we can even see in our current moment, it's not the same, of course, you know, there's stages of development, but we can even see in our current moment the strategies of divide and conquer that, you know, still exist today. And can we go to the next slide? So again, this history, the idea of plantation politics, the different roles of the different pieces of this process of abolition and Reconstruction, and how it's actually how the story is told, right? Sorry, I'm getting nervous here, but like we said, like Du Bois is engaging in this history of Reconstruction, not just for the sake of, you know, telling what happened, but to actually engage in why is history told this way and for whose benefit, and how do we actually tell the truth about what happened so that we can have an accurate diagnosis of the moment that we're in now. Next slide. And so, like John was, you know, opening up here around, you know, why we study Black Reconstruction, or rather why Du Bois writes Black Reconstruction in 1935, or releases it in 1935, is because he was able to recognize that there was a moment that was missed in Reconstruction, that had the class, had the poor and dispossessed been able to actually unite and maintain our unity, we could have, you know, continued control over that revolutionary moment. But because we weren't able to see how we were being used, how race and plantation politics in particular were being used against us to divide us, we continue to, you know, see each other as the enemy rather than the real enemy. And so I just want to read this quote before we show a little bit of the video, and we're going to start at 25 seconds, and I believe on this one. But the race element was emphasized in order that the property holders could get the support of the majority of white laborers and to make it more possible to exploit Negro labor. But the race philosophy came as a new and terrible thing to make labor unity or labor class consciousness impossible, so long as the Southern white laborers could be induced to prefer poverty to equality with the Negro, just so long as a labor movement in the South made impossible. This is a part of in the missed opportunity within Black Reconstruction. So keep that in mind. We'll come back to that, but let's watch this short clip. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a few things that are at play here while we wait for the video that Du Bois is really getting into, and why he looks at the history during the movement to end slavery and Reconstruction, because the way that history was being told. Go ahead.
Quitting time? Who says it's quitting time? I said it's quitting time. I was the foreman. I was the one says when it's quitting time of terror. Quitting time!
Oh, it was playing. Oh. Now, yeah.
Yon she comes. Miss Scott, Miss Sewell, Miss Corrine, your mama's home. Acting like a wet nurse to them low-down poor white trash slatterers instead of being here eating her supper. Cookie, they're up the fire. Miss Ellen's home. Miss Ellen got no business wearing herself out. Pup? Yes, ma'am. Take the lamp out on the porch. Wearing herself out. Mr. Gerald, Miss Ellen's home. Wearing herself out waiting for the poor white trash. Get up, dog. Barking in the house like that. Get up from there, boy. Don't you hear Miss Ellen's coming? Get out there.
We can stop right here.
And we was getting worried about you, Miss Ellen.
Fix your supper for you.
So there's you know, the popular understanding that the popular understanding of things, or the dominant understanding of things, is the dominant understanding of those who oppress and exploit, or the 1%. And so when we look at popular culture, you know, when Du Bois is looking at the way in history is being told, it was told from a perspective that really spoke to the ideology of the ruling class, the way in which they sought to keep this history of enslaved Black people. John, I don't know why it's still playing, but I don't know if we could. Okay. Um, thanks. This idea that enslaved Black people did nothing to free, themselves, that it was all the work of, these sort of moral advocates, or like that they weren't, that they didn't have any responsibility or take any leadership in the freeing of themselves. That Black people were actually, lazy and stupid. And you can, hear a little bit of that at the beginning, where, you had these two enslaved Black workers arguing about who can say it's quitting time. There was also, I see you, Troy. I'm gonna keep it moving just because I know that we're running behind. But we'll definitely we'll stop soon. But and then you also see the tension between the enslaved Black worker and, her talking shit about poor whites while serving, these super sweet and kind, slave owners, and then also managing other poor Blacks, and the way that this was set up, so that, it was always sort of, Black people not having any agency, not having any commonality with the poor whites, and this idea of the plantation politics that John pointed to, of this all white, all class unity. The next slide, please. So here's another short clip, if we could play it, John. This is only like a couple minutes.
It's over. It's over. It's all over. The war. We surrendered.
It's not possible. Why did we ever fight?
Ashley will be coming home. Yes, Ashley will be coming home. We'll plant more cotton. Cotton ought to go sky high next year.
Hurrah, hurrah, we bring the Jubilee. Hurrah, hurrah, the flag that makes you free. So we sing the chorus from Atlanta to the sea, while we were marching through Georgia.
Get out of the road, Bevel. Get out of the way.
Have you room in your carriage for a dying man?
I got no room for any southern scum alive or dead. Get out of the way.
I reckon he'd rather try and walk it as that.
Get up! Jump, you great backbreaker!
Act like they won the war.
Now you come on, give me them pants, Mr. Kennedy. Come on. Now you scrub yourself with that strong line soap before I come down and scrub you myself. I'm going to put these bitches in the violent pot. The whole Confederate Army's got the same troubles, crawling, clothes, and dysentery.
I think it's humiliating the way you're treating Mr. Kennedy.
You'd be a sight more humiliated if Mr. Kennedy's lice gets on you.
All right, we can stop it there. So obviously there's a lot. We could do a whole convening on Gone with the Wind. I'm totally down to do that. But Willie points out from, the lessons of Black Reconstruction and this idea around the caricatures of Blacks and the invisibility of poor whites. Especially noticeable is the fact that little attempt has been made to trace carefully the rise in economic development of the poor whites and their relation to the planter and the Negro labor after the war. There were 5 million or more non-slave holding whites in the South in 1860 and less than 2 million in the families of all slaveholders. Yet one might almost gather from contemporary history that the 5 million left no history and had no descendants. The extraordinary history of the rise and triumph of the poor whites has been largely neglected, even by Southern white students. And so what Du Bois is pointing out here too is it's not only that the story of enslaved Black workers and the leadership of them as a revolutionary social force is being taken away, but also the has made invisible the poor white in all of this, which is really interesting because that was, you know, also lack of a social forces analysis of history that also leaves out the poor white that Du Bois brings up. And I found, you know, and in this piece, and I'm going to close up soon, but I found in this piece that sorry?
Is Sierra frozen or am I frozen?
Oh, am I frozen?
You just for a couple seconds, yeah.
Oh man, I said some really important stuff there. It was brilliant. I don't know.
I heard everything you said.
Okay, no, just kidding. Okay. I sound like I'm echoing them. Let's see. Okay. No, it's not. It's happening. Could you mute me, John, or mute yourself, maybe?
Mute myself, yeah. I'm having a little.
Okay. Let's see. All right, that did it. Okay. So we've watched this piece over and over, this like short little segment. And today, just like something new stood out to me, which is the way in which, again, like these are relationships are being played, the way in which the resentments have been weaponized to where the, you know, enslaved Black worker looks down on the poor white. You have these carpetbaggers coming up from, you know, the north, or coming down from the north. You have these recently freed uppity Black people who think they're better than the poor white. Again, you never hear a wealthy white person look down on a poor white. It's always like, oh, we feel so bad for them. We, you know, we care so much about them, and, you know, and sort of we have this, you know, the poor Black person is, you know, being uppity or mean or whatever. And just like the way, again, like the way in which the 1% are able to, you know, are able to control the 99% by keeping us pitted against each other and making us feel like we are at war with one another rather than exposing the war that they have made on us. And so next slide. We have this little clip from Richard Pryor, a comedian. We could play this. Well, actually, let me say this before we go, and then we'll play it and I'll pass it off to you. But Black Reconstruction, again, isn't just history for history's sake, but we're really trying to understand political strategy, to understand like who's who in the zoo and like what's going on, what are we up against, and the need to have leaders like yourselves who are able to wield this history to avoid, you know, the traps and pitfalls of plantation politics, divide and conquer, and not understanding, you know, who are up against who we are, and what is possible when we unite with one another. And so play this clip by Richard Pryor, and then I'll pass it over to John.
What do you think that these executives are afraid you're going to do to white America? What do you think that these executives are afraid you're going to do to white America?
Probably stop some racism.
Stop racism?
Yeah. I'm probably afraid of that, because then people don't hate each other, and people start talking to each other, and then they start talking to each other, they find out who's the problem.
Which is?
Greedy people.
Greedy. I have a couple things I want to ask you there. Do you really think that some of the guys that you've dealt with at NBC, no names, right? Because there's lawsuits for that too, that some of these guys really want to promote racism actively, or is it a subconscious?
I just think it's part of capitalism, is to promote racism, you know, right? In order to make things work. If you feel better because you're white and you can get a job, you use that. I mean, you know, I would.
Absolutely.
Say, I'm sorry, Jack, but shit, they say I'm white. I'm going to use this.
Right. Absolutely.
Get this job. I'm hungry, you know. But, and that separates people. So they keep people separated, and that keeps them from thinking about the real problem. That's as simple as I see it. Probably it's not that simple, but...
Now, all right, you and I are about the same age, right? We're in our mid-30s. How long is it going to take before guys who think like you, and I say guys who think like me, people who don't want to have racism in the country, people who don't want to be oppressing any minority, whatever it is, sexual, whatever minority, really get into positions of power and can change things?
You can't get in a position of power, it seems, if you think like that. It seems that the only time you get in a position of power is if you're like the people that are in power. To me, I mean, that's the way it goes. I mean, people that get to become executives become like the people that were already executives.
I don't know, maybe...
They go in with good intentions, but it eats them up. It's like a cesspool, you know, it just gets on you and it starts
the system
eating.
Levels them.
Pretty soon it's all
gone. Is that
gone.
what a cesspool sounds like?
Yes. Yeah.
All right, we'll be back right after this.
Okay.
Sorry, mute. It's mute. Could you hear it okay, y'all? It was okay? Yeah, all right. So cool. So I just wanted to note, it's 5 minutes past the hour. We still got a little bit of content here left to go, but I'm also mindful. I know, Troy, you're trying to get in there, and you had maybe a comment, and so I kind of wanted to kind of reset here for a minute and just check in with y'all, just given what we've put out. Maybe folks have got burning questions or comments, whatever, and then we can kind of, we've got sort of one little last section. Hi, what do you think in terms of time?
Oh, you can go as long as you want.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah, we got plenty of time.
Okay, good. All right, cool. But so I wanted to open it up because I know we've been putting a lot out there, and I wanted to see. Troy, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to say, when we were looking at the clips from Gone with the Wind, when I discuss the lost cause ideology in class, one thing I point out to students, most of whom have not seen Gone with the Wind, but I like to point out is, and you've all seen it, so you'll know what I'm talking about. None of the black people get mad until the Yankees show up and disrupt their idyllic life. Isn't that just, so reinforcing of that idea? The second thing I want to say is, I think that you guys have done an outstanding job with this material tonight, and I thank you.
Thanks, Troy. That's really kind of you to say. That means a lot. Really does. Any other questions or comments?
Yeah, I find it interesting that, how they made the poor whites, that were, invisible, and those poor whites, I think a lot of the poor whites would and did, support, the black cause and black freedom, after the Civil War. But it would have been, I think that not teaching that proper history or true history about the poor whites has contributed to racism in this country. I think if more people would realize that the poor whites were, a lot of them were in support. I mean, there were intermarriages, there were a lot of things going on back then. If it would have been taught, up until now through history, I think it would have eased some of the racism, certainly not all of it, but certainly, in the South, because I think by people, especially poor Southern whites, not knowing that history would it always made the black people look like the bad people. And so if it would have we could have taught that, it would have contributed, I think, greatly to anti-racism.
Thank you. Hi. Other comments, other thoughts that came up from what we've been putting out here. Looks like Troy's got to jump. So, all right, Troy, be well, and let's stay in touch. Great, thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm always happy to talk about this stuff.
All right, great, good. Let's do it. All right.
I just like the PDF version sent to me, and I'm always happy to join you guys. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And I am looking forward to more conversations like this. I don't feel I really have a comment, but thank you for allowing me to sit in and to listen and to learn. And I will definitely be adding that to my reading list this summer.
Hey, Tanisha, before you go too, we'll share a few resources, and maybe, like, I think Hi probably knows how to get in touch, and but I'll send some resources along, but so long as y'all know how to be in touch with each other. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you all.
Yeah. All right, Tanisha. Thank you. Any other, this sparking anything, or anything we're missing, or anything that needs to get elaborated on, or I could do this last part here, which, on this sort of last thing we wanted to share with you on Du Bois. So what do y'all say?
I have a question, I guess. So the section is like the missed opportunity and defeat of Reconstruction. Does he offer any? I guess my question is, what's the solution? How do we not make those same mistakes, or be able to recover from them, so that we don't write those same chapters?
That's a great question. That's a little bit, I think, it feeds well into this last piece that I wanted to share with y'all, as food for thought. So for some reason, anyway, it doesn't matter. I'm having a little technical frustrations here, but y'all can see this, right? So I wanted to share with you a few excerpts from a chapter, this chapter 14, entitled Counter-Revolution of Property. And Du Bois, so this comes kind of late in the book, and it's really a summation of the defeat of Reconstruction. And I would say that it both talks about, just to your question, it talks about what happened and how Reconstruction is defeated. But it also, I think, it also suggests what it is that was required of them then, in terms of the poor and dispossessed, in terms of the folks on the bottom, and it also suggests what we need to do now. And so I wanted to. These are kind of lengthy passages, but I think they're worth reading here. And actually, can I get a volunteer to read this first passage?
I got you.
Thank you.
I like the black bar. It looks like the chapter is redacted. Like there's some real.
Oh, is there a black bar on it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
in
I
chapter
wonder
14.
I wonder what that is. Okay, it's some sort of weird thing.
Yeah.
My screen's
They
doing.
don't want us to talk about the dictatorship.
Here's what they don't want you to know.
Right.
So, but can you see at least the full text?
Oh
here?
yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, awesome.
What liberalism did not understand was that such a revolution was economic and involved force. Those who, against the public weal, well-being, have power cannot be expected to yield save to superior power. The North used its power in the Civil War to break the political power of the slave barons. During and after the war, it united its force with that of workers to uproot the still vast economic power of the planters. It hoped, with the high humanitarianism of Charles Sumner, eventually to induce the planter to surrender his economic power peacefully in return for complete political amnesty, and hoped that the North would use its federal police power to maintain the Black man's civil rights in return for peaceful industry and increasing intelligence. But Charles Sumner did not realize, and that the other Karl Marx, had not yet published Das Kapital to prove to men that economic power underlies politics. Abolitionists failed to see that after the momentary exaltation of war, the nation did not want Negroes to have civil rights, and that national industry could get its way easier by alliance with Southern landlords than by sustaining Southern workers. They did not know that when they let in the dictatorship of labor be overthrown in the South, they surrendered the hope of democracy in America for all men.
So, that right there, sorry, dag on it. That, there's a few things in here that might catch people a little bit unawares, or not unawares, but, there's a lot of academics that like to genuflect and praise Du Bois and say he's the greatest American historian. And they're just following in his footsteps. And well, I think he deserves those accolades. But I would say that not a lot of people talk about how Du Bois, for example, is talking here about the necessity, this question of power. He is saying, he's referring to the dictatorship of labor here, which had a moment to exert power, and it was overthrown in the South. Some of our comrades in the welfare rights movement have a pamphlet. The National Union of Homeless, rather. They make reference to power, not pity, right? We require organization that can match and outmaneuver the folks that we're up against. And I just wanted to sort of move on here, just in the interest of time here. I wanted to sort of share this. This is how Du Bois ends this chapter, Counter-Revolution of Property. He wrote, "God wept, but that mattered little to an unbelieving age." This is with the defeat of Reconstruction. God wept, but that mattered little to an unbelieving age. What mattered most was the world wept, and still is weeping, and blind with tears and blood. For there began to rise in America in 1876 a new capitalism and a new enslavement of labor. Home laborers in cultured lands, appeased and misled by a ballot whose power the dictatorship of vast capital strictly curtailed, was bribed by high wage and political office to unite in an exploitation of white, yellow, brown, and black labor in lesser lands and in, quote, breeds without the law. Especially workers of the New World, folks who were American and for whom America was, became ashamed of their destiny. That means their destiny as being a part of the working class. Sons of ditch diggers aspired to be the spawn of bastard kings and thieving aristocrats rather than of rough-handed children of dirt and toil. So, you're thinking about this dream of upward mobility. You're not part of a class that's going to unite, but you're, you know, it's this individualistic, you're moving on and you're going to be, you know, you're going to hit the lottery. You're going to be the next millionaire. You're going to ascribe to that prosperity gospel. The immense profit from this new exploitation and worldwide commerce enabled a guild of millionaires to engage the greatest engineers, the wisest men of science, as well as pay high wages to the more intelligent, I would say, quote, intelligent labor, and at the same time to have left enough surplus to make more through more thorough the dictatorship of capital. So they're over the state and over the popular vote, not only in Europe and America, but in Asia and Africa. So this organized section, and that's Wall Street, right? And it's these industrialists that emerge out of the defeat of Reconstruction, who are able to bribe sections of the working class and make them follow their leadership. The world wept because within the exploiting group of New World masters, greed and jealousy became so fierce that they fought for trade and markets and materials and slaves all over the world until at last in 1914, the world flamed in war. So that's World War I. That's the imperialist war between these countries. The fantastic structure fell, leaving grotesque profits and poverty, plenty and starvation, empire and democracy staring at each other across world depression. So we're moving forward. You know, Du Bois is writing in 1935. He's saying, now we're in this economic crisis under capitalism. And the rebuilding, this is key here, y'all, this is key. And the rebuilding, whether it comes now or a century later, will and must go back to the basic principles of Reconstruction in the United States during 1867 through 1876. Land, light, and leading for slaves black, brown, yellow, and white under a dictatorship of the proletariat. This is the language Du Bois is using. Now, Eric Foner and a bunch of other historians that like to say they're just carrying on the legacy of Du Bois, they're not gonna lift this up. But Du Bois had come through and he was speaking to the situation in the United States, speaking to the situation of the South, and he was studying other revolutionary processes, and he was seeing how they had kicked the ass of the rich. And so this question here, which is not a super easy thing to just give you a real simple, you know, your question here about what is to be done, but he is saying that we're going to need cadre and organization, right, to be able to be guided by, and I love this, land, light, and leading. You know, that's you know, land is, you know, you think about in that time, you know, it's the means of production, it's the 40 acres and a mule, that was the call of Reconstruction, for people to be economically independent from their former enslavers. Light, that's education. We need education, political education. We need all kinds of education, right? And leading. A lot of times we're, you know, maybe you're not comfortable with this term cadre or leadership. I know people sometimes struggle with leadership, but we need to develop leaders who are positioned within all sections of folks who are hurting in this country, right? So these struggles don't get pitted against each other, and they're not, you know, outwitted and outmaneuvered by those that they're up against. And so that's kind of where I would sort of put it, you know, that I think we need to take seriously sort of, this is where Du Bois leaves it, right? And this is the prescription he gives. One of the things he says in this chapter, the counter-revolution of property, not the counter-revolution of mean white people. They were mean, evil race of sons of bitches, but they were property. We got to get clear on this relationship to the economy and how that translates into political power, right? It's not just this sort of floating metaphysical thing about racism, whatever. It is how folks are, nobody's, you know, they don't ever exploit us evenly, right? And that's actually how the damn system works. And so it's that kind of clarity that we need to try to promote amongst ourselves and develop leadership that can kind of have that clarity and organization of the poor and dispossessed. And so, you know, we had this quote here from King remarking on Du Bois. King in 1968 saw the necessity in order to take on racism, poverty, militarism. He saw the necessity that we're going to have to unite the poor and dispossessed across lines of division to become a new and unsettling force in our complacent national life. The fact that he's taken on Du Bois, and in that I'll share this speech with y'all too. You should read King's speech, the full thing. He goes into how brilliant Black Reconstruction is. We say the King, Du Bois presents the fundamental problem, the fundamental question before us in terms of political strategy in this country. And King, in the formation of the Poor People's Campaign, suggested the solution, right? And I think that's kind of what we want to suggest here and that's the history, that's the legacy that High represents here, and that's the legacy that we need to pick up that mantle and continue on. So that's how I guess that's how I'd respond. So anyway, I'm gonna calm down here. So all right. So anyway, I don't know. Any other folks want to add anything else there, or?
Well, John, a lot of people, I don't think they realize that they need to use more their words as weapons. Like Bois does, King, and hundreds of others. That to use the words as believe that their words is a weapon, and they can defeat capitalism, they can defeat racism, they can defeat a lot of things. But if people would just realize that words, when they speak those words and stand behind those words to defeat racism. But I think there's too much complacency going on, with people that want to be effective or want to be organizers or whatever. But I think more people need to, and this is only my belief, that more people need to look at their words and how those words penetrate, people's minds. And I think, this was excellent how it's done tonight. I think that has, and I think this, this session here could be used to teach more people how to use those words as weapons.
Well, as promised here, we've got resources that we'd like to send on, and I can forward it on to y'all. I'm seeing a comment here. The difference between 1968 and today needs to be understood as the economics has shifted fundamentally. So that's absolutely right. I don't know who put that in, but you're absolutely right. I think that could be something to, oh, hey, Andy, that could be something that would be worth like really delving into. Sometimes I think about like, there were things that were even being anticipated in terms of what King and the folks in the Poor People's Campaign were talking about. And even the fact that core sections of the social forces that made up the Poor People's Campaign, whether it's, folks that have been displaced off of the mechanization of cotton production, and we're ending up in Chicago and Cleveland in terms of Black folks especially being displaced out, or white, mostly white, but also Black folks out of Appalachia through the changes of production in coal. But I think it's kind of interesting to look at that history and then like go from there and talk about in terms of the process of mechanization and globalization and everything in order to sort of see kind of from there to where we stand today. All right. Well, we're going to send some good resources to you, and if you all want to, I'll put my email in here. If anybody wants to follow up, I know Sierra is always open for connecting with folks too, right? And so I think that we might wrap it up here, unless there's anybody else got some sort of burning thing that they want to share. Yeah. Thank you so much.
I just want to thank you folks for, boy, this has been just an outstanding few weeks here, and I'd like you to come back and do it again. And I think we could do it on a wider scale, you know. And,
yeah, if y'all taught a class on this book, I would be there.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I got to say, you know, this, you know, Black Reconstruction, it's almost 800 pages. It's over 700 pages, but we have made it work. That we have got work. You know, we got organizers who are, you know, who have got real responsibilities and who are, you know, they don't have time to just do whatever that, you know, but we've gone through this process multiple times of reading this text together. And folks get through it, and we work, and it's one of these texts that it's best to study together. And so, yeah, that's right. We need more of that, and if we can, you know, I'd be open for us talking about how we might do that. So that, like I said, this was an advertisement. So, all right, y'all. So, good night to everybody, and it's a blessing to be here in this space with you, and y'all take care. All right. All right.
Thanks, y'all.
All.
Thanks.
Keep on keeping on.